grab your Bibles and go to Revelation chapter 3. That's where we're going to start tonight. We're going to be jumping around a little bit, but we have been studying on Sunday night here, places in Revelation. I'm a guy who likes patterns. I like the flow of things over time, and as I was going through the book of Revelation, I saw these places, like I've heard of these places before. So, kind of, where does this start? Where do we first learn about these places in Revelation and in the Bible? Most going all the way back to Genesis. How they flow through, and what is the picture that we get in Revelation based on where they are and who they are? So today we're going to start at Jerusalem. And I say start because there is so much on Jerusalem. It's going to take us a couple of weeks to get through it. But we're going to look at Jerusalem, and the first place that it is mentioned in the book of Revelation is Revelation chapter 3, which you would have to agree is fairly early. This is where Jesus is talking to John, and he's telling him to send letters to the churches of Asia. And that's where we started this whole study, wasn't it? It was Asia, that area, kind of that tip of Turkey today. These churches that were problematic for Paul, his entire ministry. In fact, as he's writing to Timothy, he says, all of Asia has turned against me. So they were a problem, and here we have Jesus now writing to them saying, you're still a problem. Some of you, a couple of you not, but most of you, and you need to get together, right? But if anybody's saved, they are saved, right? And here we have actually in chapter 3, verse 12, in a letter that is written to the church in Philadelphia, which they're actually doing pretty well. But he says here, him that overcometh will I make a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go no more out. And I will write upon him the name of my God, and the name of the city of my God, which is New Jerusalem, which cometh down out of heaven from my God, and I will write upon him my new name. So right here, actually at the very beginning of the book of Revelation, we have this foreshadowing that at the end there will be a new Jerusalem coming down in a new heaven and a new earth to come down as the dwelling place of God that will be with man. Right? So at the very beginning, he's established this is where we're going with this. Which brings us to a question. What's Jerusalem? Why Jerusalem? Why is this so important? Well, we're going to do a little history lesson this week and figure out kind of where Jerusalem kind of comes into history. And really, the first mentions of a settlement in this area of Jerusalem goes all the way back to the time of the Egyptians. So is that pretty far back? About 2000 BC, we have the first writings about an establishment of a 15-acre city. Is that very big? Not very big. And it's just on the eastern ridge of the area now known as Jerusalem. And it's interesting because it is fed by a spring. There's no river running through it. It's up on a mountain, up on a hill, which means if you put a wall on it, it's pretty well protected. And the water source is coming up through a spring, which I find interesting because the New Jerusalem, what's that river going to be fed by? Not a river, but a spring, springing forth from the throne of God. So it's kind of going to be the same kind of thing. So here, some people decided to create a little city known by the Egyptians as Rushalamum. Yeah, everybody got that? Sure. Jerusalem. That's starting to sound more familiar. That was more later on, about the time of Abraham. The area was known as Jerusalem. And if you want to kind of get back, it kind of went forward from there. The Assyrians called it something very close to that, Jerusalem. And basically what it was, you kind of break down the words, and it basically means the foundation of a Ugaritic god of peace. So it became known as the city that is the foundation of peace. Doesn't that sound nice? Yes. And they never really grew. It was just this little 15-acre area. In fact, I'm going to send around some pictures. You guys like pictures? See you at home. See? Yeah, you see that? I'll send one here. We'll take a look at that and pass that down. This is a snapshot. No, it's not actually a picture. But it's a rendering of what is known as the city of David. When David, we'll get this later, actually comes and finally conquers Jerusalem, it is just that area. This is the eastern ridge. It's about 15 acres. It had a wall around it. It was owned at the time by the Jebusites, and we'll get to that as well. But you can see it's just that little area along this ridge, and that's where it stood from 2000 until about 600 BC. Just that little area. Now you'll see north of that, Mount Moriah. We'll get to that in a minute. That's very important. That's where the temple's going to be. But it really was just this little area. So when you picture Jerusalem all the way back here in the 2000, 1500s, 1300s, this is what it is. Just a tiny little city on a hill. Okay? And it goes along here. Now the first mention of it in the Bible is actually in Genesis chapter 14. So let's all go there. Genesis chapter 14, verse 17. How many would also say this is pretty early? This is very early. Genesis chapter 14, we're going to start in verse 17. Now, just to give you context, this is when, you remember Abram and Lot. They had many sheep and herds and things like that, and their herdsmen were starting to fight each other over land. So Abraham turned to Lot and said, choose. Do you want that area down there along the valley with the streams and rivers and things like that? That sounds really nice. Or do you want this area over here? What did Lot choose? Based on his eyesight, he said, I want the easy way, which was a place called, and we've already studied this as a place in Revelation, Sodom and Gomorrah. And immediately some problems arose. They were attacked, and Lot and his family were carried off, along with all of the various treasures of Sodom. And they called upon Abram. Said, can you come help us? And did he? Yes, God allowed him and his little band of servants to go and take them. And the king of Sodom was very happy. Let's start in verse 17 of chapter 14. And the king of Sodom went out to meet Abram after his return from the slaughter of Cheddar. That's what I like to call him. This makes it easier. And of the kings that were with him at the valley of Shavah, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek. That sound familiar? And again, Jesus is known as the one after the order of Melchizedek. And he was a prophet of God and a king of Salem, or as we would call it now, Jerusalem. Yes, same place. Brought forth bread and wine, and he was the priest of the Most High God, and he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand, and he gave him tithes of all. Now, why do we say Salem is the same as Jerusalem, or at the time, Jerusalem? Well, because of Psalm 76. Let's go there. Psalm 76, verses 1 and 2. Psalm 76, starting in verse 1. In Judah is God known, his name is great in Israel. In Salem also is his tabernacle, and his dwelling place is what? Zion. So this actually, Salem here is the same as the one in Genesis, that it says his place is in Salem, because they are the same place. Salem is the same as Jerusalem. And Jeru just means foundation. Salem means peace. Foundation of peace, which they took from these guys. They named them after their gods. Things like that. So we have Melchizedek. So what do we learn about this place called Salem, Jerusalem? It is a place of prophets, right? Prophet of God was at this place. Okay. Next time we hear of it is in Genesis 22. Now, in that first story, when he meets Melchizedek, his name is not Abraham, but Abram, right? His name is now going to be Abraham, and not only that, but he's going to have a son. No, not that one. The right one, Isaac. So, he has a son. Anybody remember what God wanted him to do with his only begotten, as he's called, Ishmael? The son of promise. What he wants to do with him? He wants you to go and sacrifice him. Chapter 22, verses 1 and 2. And it came to pass after these things that God did test Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. So, good response. If God ever comes and says, hello, say what? Here am I. Very good thing. Verse 2. And he said, Take now thy son, thine only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. Anybody want to know where Mount Moriah is? That is Jerusalem. It's this area. Now, this is the current place of it, and Mount Moriah is just north of that, just there. So I want you to go, and on a mount in the area of Moriah, I want you to sacrifice your son. Now, let's jump to verse 10. Don't leave you hanging out there, right? Genesis 22:10, if you didn't know what happened. And Abraham stretched forth his hand and took the knife to slay his son. Is that exciting? Got everybody's attention now? Yeah. They went up there, just he and his son, made his son carry the wood the whole way. And they made an altar. He bound his son. He laid him on the wood. And he took a knife and was going to kill him. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him. For now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, behind him a ram caught in a thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram and offered him up for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of that place Jehovah-Jireh, which means what? The Lord provides. As it was said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. So we have here, this place, Jerusalem, is in the area where there was what? Sacrifice. And also what? Sacrifice of the son, but also God's provision of the sacrifice, right? So yeah, this is where he was willing to, but more importantly, this is the place where the sacrifice is done. So now we will actually get to Mount Moriah itself later, because you'll see where Mount Moriah is in this reference. But we'll get to that, and Mount Zion. Mount Zion and Mount Moriah are basically both sides of this little place back then in Jerusalem. One on one side, one on the other. We'll get to that. But you can see this place Jerusalem, has a long history, doesn't it? And while all this is going on, this little city, this little walled city, 15-acre little city, is all sitting there. Okay? And that's now. Later on, when they actually enter into the promised land. So how far out from Abraham are we talking about? Abraham had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, including Joseph. Joseph was taken as a slave into Egypt, became the second in command. There was famine in the land, so his whole family came there. They lived in Egypt, and they stayed there for 400 years. So we're advancing the story quite a bit here. They were there for 400 years before God said, I will now intervene, and by my right hand I will deliver my people. By the way, who did he tell that he would do that? Abraham. He already told Abraham he would do that. I'm going to take your people, your descendants, I'm going to take them to a foreign land. They're going to be there for 400 years, and then I will bring them out by my mighty right hand. So God's always in control, isn't he? He brings them out, and of course we know it should have been a 2-year journey instead of it being a 40-year journey to get to the promised land, right? And did they finally get into the promised land? With God's help, right? In fact, let's go to Joshua chapter 10. Hey, Dana. Joshua chapter 10 is when we really see the next reference to Jerusalem. And Jerusalem at this point is owned by the Amorites and the Amorite kings and a bunch of other people. And it's still pretty much the same thing. Still this tiny little 15-acre walled area here. And right before this, the Gibeonites, who lived in the promised land, remember they came and they tricked Joshua. They said they were from a far off land. They had like moldy bread and they wore haggard clothes, ripped and torn and worn. Oh, we come from a faraway land, and we want to make peace with you. And Joshua said, hold on, let me ask first. No. He just said, yeah, let's do it. And he made a treaty with the people of Gibeon, and then they walked away laughing because they're like, great. We'll pay tribute, we'll be your servants, but at least you won't destroy us. And we don't have to leave. Well, that whole situation caused some problems for the king of Jerusalem. They said, oh, Gibeon's on their side. That cuts off my access through that area that I need to go for trade. So I'm going to attack who? Gibeon. Chapter 10, verse 1. Now it came to pass when Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, had heard how Joshua had taken Ai and had utterly destroyed it, and as he had done to Jericho and her king, so he had done to Ai and her king, and how the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were among them. And they feared greatly, because Gibeon was a great city, as one of the royal cities, and because it was greater than Ai, and all the men whereof were mighty. Wherefore Adonizedek, king of Jerusalem, sent unto Hoham, king of Hebron. By the way, Hebron will come up later. And King Piram of Jarmuth, and unto Japhia, king of Lachish, and unto Debir, king of Eglon, saying, come up unto me and help me, that we might smite Gibeon, for it hath made peace with Joshua and with the children of Israel. Therefore the 5 kings of the Amorites, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, king of Jarmuth, king of Lachish, king of Eglon, gathered themselves together and went up, they and all their hosts, and encamped before Gibeon and made war against it. Now, Gibeon sees this, and they say, we're in trouble, because we got 5 kings against us and coming and waging war. So they send a message to whom? Their new best friend. Right? The newest ally. Hey, Joshua, we've got a problem here. Verse 6. And the men of Gibeon sent unto Joshua to the camp of Gilgal, saying, slack not thy hand from thy servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites that dwell in the mountains were gathered together against us. So Joshua ascended from Gilgal, he and all the people of war with him, and all the mighty men of valor. And the Lord said to Joshua, fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua therefore came up upon them suddenly, and went up from Gilgal all night. And they came all night, and they came, and did they win? See, when God says you're going to win, then you what? You win. And they did utterly destroy them. Okay? So here we have now the king of Jerusalem being killed by Joshua and his army, and they kind of take it. But you know the story of Joshua, right? They conquered the land, but what did they never really do? Clear it completely control it. They kind of let it roll. And guess what happened in Jerusalem? Did they take control of it? Unfortunately, they did not. In fact, let's go to Judges 15:8. I'm sorry. Judges 1. That's where I want to go. Judges chapter 1. Judges chapter 1 is one of the saddest chapters in the Bible. Like I told you what to do and they didn't do it. That's basically the bottom line, right? Judges chapter 1, verse 8. Now we find out in Joshua 15:8, we didn't go there, but basically this land was given to Judah, and Benjamin's right next to it. By the way, today it's the same thing. Throughout their history, Jerusalem is kind of on that border, where some of it's kind of Judah, some of it is Benjamin, right? And look what happened in Judges chapter 1, verse 8. Now the children of Judah had fought against Jerusalem and had taken it and smitten it with the edge of the sword and set the city on fire. Does that sound good? Yes. All right. They did their job. Woo-hoo. What about 21? Chapter 1, verse 21, though. And the children of Benjamin did not drive out the Jebusites that inhabited Jerusalem, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Benjamin in Jerusalem unto this day. So there's something interesting about Jerusalem that will be consistent throughout history. From this point on, it is a divided city. Is it still a divided city today? Absolutely. Anybody ever seen a map of Jerusalem? Anybody knows how it's split? We have the Muslim area. We have the Jewish area. We have the Christian area. And it's all split out. Anybody know where the mount is? That's where the temple is, Mount Moriah. And really, it is from this point in Judges that Jerusalem just never really gets it together. It's constantly dividing, constantly over something. Even during the time of Jesus, it was very much a divided city between the Greek Jews, and the Sadducees and that crowd, and the what? The Pharisees and the Jewish Jews, right? Plus you had the quarter where the Romans were. And the Romans, the Greeks, and the Jewish. So always being divided, never really completely under control except for a very small period of time during the time of David and Solomon. And how long is that going to go on? To today. It was meant as a city of prophets. It was meant as a city of sacrifice. And yet, doesn't really get there. In fact, let's go to Judges chapter 19. Chapter 1 of Judges is a very sad chapter. Chapter 19 is one of the worst stories in the Bible. You guys know which one it is? Chapter 19, verse 1. During the time of the judges, this happened. And it came to pass in those days when there was no king in Israel, and there was a certain Levite sojourning on the side of Mount Ephraim, who took to him a concubine out of Bethlehem, Judah. That Bethlehem? Yes, that Bethlehem, which is right next to what city? Jerusalem. And his concubine played the whore against him and went away from him into her father's house to Bethlehem, Judah, and was there 4 whole months. And her husband arose and went after her to speak friendly unto her and to bring her again, having his servants with him and a couple of asses. And she brought him into her father's house. And when the father of the damsel saw him, rejoiced to meet him. Probably wanted her out of the house. Okay, verse 4. And his father-in-law, the damsel's father, retained entertained him, and he abode with him 3 days. So they did eat and drink and lodge there. And it came to pass on the 4th day, when they rose early in the morning, that he arose up to depart. And the damsel's father said unto his son-in-law, Comfort thine heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward go your way. He's stalling him. He wants him to stay there, right? And they sat down and did eat and drink, both of them together. For the damsel's father had said unto the man, Be content, I pray thee, and tarry all night, and let thine heart be merry. Just keep eating and drinking, keep hanging out here. And when the man rose up to depart, his father-in-law urged him. Therefore he lodged there again. Just going day after day here. And he rose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. And the damsel's father said, Comfort thine heart, I pray thee. And they tarried until afternoon, and they did eat, both of them. So, you guys know people like this? Yeah. Sounds like a Corey trip, doesn't it? I'm leaving at 1 in the morning. One of these days at 4 in the afternoon. 9 o'clock. Verse 9. And when the man rose up to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the damsel's father said unto him, Behold, now the day draws toward evening. I pray you, tarry all night. Behold, the day groweth to an end. Lodge here, and thine heart may be merry. And tomorrow get you early on your way, that thou mayest go home. But the man would not tarry. This is where you have a foreboding, dun, 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 because bad things are about to happen. He did not tarry that night, but he rose up and departed and came over against, where? Jebus. You say, what in the world is Jebus? Jebus is Jerusalem. It is what it was known at the time of the judges. It was known as Jebus because it was the home of the Jebusites. So he goes there, and that makes sense because it'd be kind of the next place from Bethlehem. If you're traveling that way, you would hit Jebus, which is Jerusalem. And there with him 2 asses saddled. His concubine also was with them. And when they were by Jebus, the day was far spent. And the servant said unto his master, Come, I pray thee, and let us turn into this city of the Jebusites, and lodge in it. And his master said unto him, We will not turn aside hither into the city of a stranger, that is not of the children of Israel. We will pass over to Gibeah. So at this time, technically they conquered it back in chapter 1. What did they never do? Never actually drove out the Jebusites. So at this point, it was seen as a stranger city, not someplace safe for an Israelite to go. Little did they know that the city they went to, which is the city of Benjamin, terrible, terrible things happened. That ended up with the death of his concubine and him sending her off in parts to all the other tribes and having all the tribes come and almost wiping Benjamin off the face of the earth. So all that happened. You want to read it, you can. It's very sad. It's a very sad story. But it's kind of, you understand, Jerusalem was supposed to be something special. What does it become? A stranger city. Because they would not drive them out until when? Let's circulate. 1 Chronicles chapter 11. Finally, David. First Chronicles chapter 11. Now, David at this point had been technically king for about 7 years. The problem was not all 12 tribes were completely behind him, and his kingdom was set up in a place called Hebron, which was kind of a Judah town. When everybody saw him as the king of Judah and some of the tribes. But now, finally, all the tribes are going to get behind him. He is going to become the king of the 12 tribes, and he decides, I need a different city than Hebron. I need something more centralized. I need something closer to the other tribes. So I'm going to choose what? This place. Well fortified, got good walls, got a good spring. I'm going to take that. Chapter 11 of 1 Chronicles. Then all Israel gathered themselves unto David unto Hebron, saying, Behold, we are thy bone and thy flesh. And moreover, in time past, even when Saul was king, You were he that led us out and brought us in Israel. And the Lord thy God said unto thee, Thou shalt feed my people Israel, and thou shalt be ruler over my people Israel. So they acknowledge that David was the handpicked guy, right, to take over for Saul. Even from a young man, when he was still that one out there taking care of the sheep, and Samuel came along and said, what? You're the next king. Therefore came all the elders of Israel to the king to Hebron, and David made a covenant with them in Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel, according to the word of the Lord by Samuel. And David and all Israel went to Jerusalem, which is Jebus, where the Jebusites were, the inhabitants of the land. And inhabitants of Jebus said to David, Thou shalt not come hither. Nevertheless, David took the castle of Zion, which is in the city of David. And again, another name starts popping up, a Mount Zion, in the place of Zion. And this is what he would have taken, is that section which is still known today, even in Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a giant, sprawling city. This is known as the core city, or the city of David, because that is what he took. They said, You will not, and he took it anyways. Verse 6, and David said, Whosoever smiteth the Jebusites first shall be chief and captain. This is a good audition. So who stands up? Joab. You remember Joab? You know what about Joab? Joab was a hothead, jealous, very inferiority complex. He had a lot of problems. But he knew how to get things done. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, went first up and was chief. And David dwelt in the castle, therefore they call it the city of David. And he built the city round about, even from Millo, round about, and Joab repaired the city of rest of the city. So David waxed greater and greater, so the Lord of hosts was with him. And he ended up reigning in Jerusalem for 33 years. So now we have Jerusalem is not just the city that's of prophets and sacrifice, but it is the city of the what? King. But its greatest prominence is what happens next. Because Jerusalem is going to be the hand-picked place for God's temple. At this point, the tabernacle, that same one that they had built at Sinai, that one they've been carrying around and moving around with them, with the ark and all the various instruments and things like that, that was a temporary thing, right? And God did say, I want a permanent place. When you get in the land, I will have a permanent place. But it hadn't been chosen yet. They were still using the tabernacle, and most of the time it was in Shiloh. But now he's going to say, let's move it to Jerusalem. And it's a very specific place. Let's go to 1 Chronicles chapter 21. Unfortunately, with many of the stories at this point in David's life, it starts with him doing something stupid. He gets this great idea that he wants to number the people. Why would somebody back then want to number the people? Pass this on the back. Also, how much war can I make? Who are my people? Who's of what age? Who can I fight for me? It's all really only to say, this is who I can put my trust in as myself, right? How many people does David really need to be successful? It doesn't matter because it's got God on his side. So he was told specifically not to do it. Let's go to chapter 21, verse 1. And Satan stood up against Israel and provoked David to number Israel. So who's really behind all this? Satan. He tempts him. And David said to Joab, yes, the one who famously went first to attack the Jebusites and take Jerusalem, and to the rulers of the people, go number Israel from Beersheba even to Dan, which is the northern point, and bring the number of them to me that I may know it. I need to know what my kingdom is. I need to know how great I am. Is God happy? No. God's not happy at all. In fact, he gives David a choice of 3 punishments. I want to see what you guys think. Verse 8. And David said unto God, I have sinned greatly because I have done this thing. You gotta like that about David, right? What's his response whenever God says he's done something wrong? You're right. I am absolutely wrong, and I'm sorry for what I did. Okay? But now I beseech thee, do away the iniquity of thy servant, for I have done very foolishly. And the Lord spake unto Gad, who was the prophet at this point, David's seer, saying, Go and tell David, saying, Thus saith the Lord, I offer thee 3 things. Choose thee one of them, that I may do it unto thee. So yeah, I will forgive, but there's a consequence here, right? You choose the consequence. So Gad came to David and said unto him, Thus saith the Lord, choose thee either 3 years famine. And if you're in an agrarian society, 3 years of famine is death to a lot of people, right? That's a problem. Or 3 months to be destroyed before thy foes. People will come and invade and kill your people for 3 months. While that the sword of thine enemies overtaketh thee, or else 3 days of the sword of the Lord, even the pestilence in the land, and the angel of the Lord destroying throughout all the coast of Israel. Or you have 3 days of me just bringing pestilence on the land and killing people. All right, which one are you going to choose? 3 days? Why 3 days? Shorter, right? 3 months is a long time. People getting killed left and right, all right? But 3 months.
Plus, there's always a chance for grace.
There's always a chance of grace with God, right? Because He can always just say, let's not do that, right? So, which one do you think He chose? Let's find out. Finishing up verse 12. Now therefore advise thyself that what word I shall bring again to him that sent me. So Gad says, Tell me, and I will tell God your choice. And David said unto Gad, I am in a great strait. Yeah. Where's choice number 4? Just full forgiveness and nothing bad happens. Where's that one, right? It's not there. Let me fall now into the hand of the Lord, for very great are his mercies, but let me not fall in the hand of man. So it's very much like Amy said, right? I'd rather be in the hands of God, because he's a merciful and a fair God, right? Put your hands in the people. You don't know what you're going to get, do you? So the Lord sent pestilence upon Israel, and there fell of Israel 70,000 men. That's a lot, isn't it? And God sent an angel unto Jerusalem to destroy it. And as he was destroying, the Lord beheld, and he repented him of the evil, and said to the angel that destroyed, It is enough. Stay now thine hand. And the angel of the Lord stood by the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. So, God is sending. 70,000 people are dead. And now the angel is about to strike Jerusalem with the pestilence. Now, you have a big area with lots of people crammed in an area. What happens when a pestilence hits that? Like wildfire. I mean, it's just going to go, and a lot more than 70,000. And God looked at that and said, no, I can't let that happen. So was David right? God is a merciful God. God is a just God. He's not going to go more than needs be, and he wasn't going to hit Jerusalem like that. He's not going to have that many die. So he told him to stop. And where did he stop at? The threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Which tells you what? Who's still living there? Jebusites. This is well into his 33-year reign in Jerusalem, and he still has what living there? Jebusites. Huh?
Do you know?
Not specifically.
Do we know when?
Well, it depends on which part. Some could have been written by somebody could have been written by the judges themselves. Some say Samuel wrote a lot of it. Some say, there's all kinds of theories on who wrote it.
Okay.
And the last section, the ones after Samson, are very not quite sure, even how they fit in the timeline.
It said, in 121, to this day.
Yeah.
So, what's that?
And it's always amazing the number of times the Bible says to this day, and he means actually today, 2023. So, but yeah. Verse 16, and David lifted up his eyes and saw the angel of the Lord stand between the earth and the heaven, having a drawn sword in his hand stretched out over Jerusalem. Scary? Yeah. Then David and the elders of Israel who were clothed in sackcloth fell upon their faces. And David said unto God, Is it not I that commanded the people to be numbered? Even I it is that have sinned and done evil indeed. But as for these sheep, what have they done? Let thine hand, I pray thee, O Lord my God, be on me and my father's house, but not on the people, that they should be plagued. So you see the heart of David here, right? That's a right heart. And what does God say? Verse 18. Then the angel of the Lord commanded Gad to say to David that David should go up and set up an altar unto the Lord in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And David went up at the saying of Gad, which he spake in the name of the Lord, and Ornan turned back and saw the angel right over his house, right over his threshing floor. And his 4 sons were with him, hid themselves. Now Ornan was threshing wheat. And as David came to Ornan, Ornan looked and saw David, and went out of the threshing floor, and bowed himself to David with his face to the ground. Then David said to Ornan, Grant me the place of this threshing floor, that I may build an altar therein unto the Lord, that thou shalt grant it me for the full price, that the plague may be stayed from the people. So he says, I will buy it. And of course Ornan says, no, you can take it. You can take whatever you want. You're big bad David. It's like, no, I'll pay it. And he bought it. And he made an altar, and that stopped it. Now you say, what does all this have to do with Jerusalem and its eternal history? Why is this so prominent? Well, because of something we actually read about earlier. Let's go to 2 Chronicles again, chapter 3. Second Chronicles chapter 3, verse 1. We read this already. Then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord appeared unto David his father in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And he began to build in the 2nd year of the 2nd month in the 4th year of his reign. So, where is the temple? Where's the Temple Mount? Where is the temple that Solomon built? On Ornan's threshing floor, where David built an altar to stop the plague from hitting Jerusalem. So what has God done? God has said, okay, Jerusalem is the place for my king. It is also the place for my what? So is it any question here that that's basically forever? What is it? King. Oh, I'm not following.
You said those are the prophets, right? So you should have big prophet.
Prophets. Right. So the prominence of Jerusalem to God is it's the place of the king, and it's the place of what? His house. He has chosen it as such. So, for how long though? Forever. In fact, let's go to Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1. Let's talk about millennium. You guys like millennium? Millennial Falcon? No, not that one. The millennium. The 1,000-year reign. Where does Jesus reign? Anybody know? For 1,000 years? In Jerusalem. It is the place of the king, right? Isaiah chapter 2, verse 1. The word that Isaiah the son of Amoz saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. Keep in mind, Jerusalem is that city on a what? Hill. It's not in a low valley. It's not along a river. It is at the top, and it's fed by a spring. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of God of Jacob, and he will will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come ye, and let us walk in the light of the Lord. So Jerusalem will, in the millennium, for 1,000 years, be the place of the what? Place of the king. Also the place of the what? Any Ezekiel fans out there? In Ezekiel, he goes on for chapter after chapter that goes into extreme detail of the new temple that will be built in Jerusalem during the time of the millennium so people can come and bring their sacrifices. Not sacrifices for sin, but sacrifices for what? Praise and honor and all those kinds of things will be brought to Jerusalem. He will do this, and that for 1,000 years it will be the place of the king and the place of the temple. What about after that? When the new Jerusalem comes down, Revelation chapter 21. What city is going to come out of the heavens? When Jesus said to the disciples, I go to prepare a place for you, what's Jesus been working on? The biggest city this world has ever seen. You guys ever realize how big Jerusalem is? We mapped it out. If you basically went from Jerusalem to Rome, that'd be one side of the city. And then it's just as high. Gigantic city. Place for all to come. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men. The temple, the tabernacle, the place of God, the seat of God is now with who? With men, right? That's what Jerusalem is being. And he will dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, neither sorrow, neither crying, nor shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said unto me, Write, for these words are what? True and faithful. This is going. So Jerusalem, what does it represent? It's always represent. It's that place where Melchizedek came from. Right? It's the place where Abraham was asked to sacrifice his son, but God provided a better sacrifice, right? It's the place where they were supposed to clean it out, and they never really got around to it. It's a divided city, still a divided city to this day because of that. But God intended to be what? The house, the place of his king and of his temple, which it will be completely for 1,000 years, and then it will be what? For eternity. Now, there won't actually be a temple there, but God will be there, right? No more box, no more curtains, none of that stuff, but we will be with him forever and ever and ever. That's what Jerusalem is. The foundation of peace. I don't think they understood that when they called it that. But it is that foundation, right? And it's going to be that forever. So, that's the history of Jerusalem. Just the tip of the iceberg is the thing we're going to look at. So we'll look at a little more next week, okay? So if you want to read some stuff, or anyone wants another picture. So I thought it was a pretty good picture of the city. But think about it. So it went from a little 15-acre city on top of a ridge, and someday it's going to be the city the size of the United States. Almost. Texas? I don't know how big it is. Huge. That's the city. So, all right? The place of God. All right? Any questions? That was a lot.
Do we actually get a new name?
I don't know. We get a new name. He has a name that nobody can understand, but everybody knows what it is. I don't know. It's kind of weird, but yeah. I don't know if we get new names or I don't know what we're gonna get. We're gonna be perfect though. That's gonna be cool. Every thought, every intention, every desire will be in God's will. It'll be a good day, forever and ever and ever.